So you try to make things right. Most of them were more than 20 years in the service, and so you had to find out what exposures they had, and then, fit the evaluation to those exposures.
And how long did you work at the Pentagon?
9 years.
And what was your job, or how did you get in there?
Believe it or not, it was just an advertisement in the Washington Post. They said physician assistant, and they wanted somebody to work in occupational and environmental medicine. So I said, well, that's my field, and found out where the P.O. box was, sent the stuff in. Finally got an interview, and I said, the Pentagon? Okay, all right.
So you were there for 9/11. On the day, you were right there?
I had just finished talking to my husband, because we're both from New York, and we had been in the towers, in the, Windows on the World, it was called. I said, I have to dash off because I have a 10 o'clock meeting in Alexandria, the next town. I heard a thud as I was almost out of the building. I thought, well, the thud, it could be, a crane that was fixing 3 and 4. They just had finished 3 and 4, so they were on 5 and 6. And the clinic was on 8, and I just had to walk from 8 to 10 to get to the metro. I mean, it's 29 acres, but still, it can take that long. So I missed one train, and then the next train was coming in, and they closed the station. So that was like 6 minutes from the time I heard a thud as I was almost out of the building to the time that we were told to get out of the metro. So I was almost out of the building when that thud happened, but it was on the opposite side of where I was. This is 10, and that was 3 and 4. So when we came back up out of the metro, I came alongside to see, because I could see the smoke, and where the smoke was coming from was the opposite side. So I fought my way to the guy, who was beside himself, no, you can't go back there. You have to go to Pentagon City, which was the opposite direction. That was the biggest thing, because they said, no, because I didn't have my white coat on. I was going to another building. So I said, no, here, my ID has a cross on it. That means I work in the clinic, because he was like, really? So he said, yeah, you go ahead. So I went there, and I saw a doctor I did not know. They were from the
Arlington Hospital Center.
And I saw a doctor I did not know. They were from the Arlington Hospital Center. So I introduced myself as a PA, and he said, well, there's a couple of stethoscopes. They were terrible stethoscopes. I couldn't hear anything. And he said, choose one of the tarpaulins. Triage means that you have either a red, a yellow, or a black. The black means you're dying. So that's where you put people if you're busy with the other. So he said, well, which one do you want? I said, well, I'll take the intermediate one, the yellow one. There was no yellows. We all were doing red. And most of them were just smoke inhalation, bad smoke inhalation. And then some of them came out, I remember one woman, she had nothing on her back. It was probably a blowback. Her skirt was intact. It was probably cotton. And this was probably either silk or polyester on the blouse and the back. But her legs below the skirt had all of their skin just off in sheets, hanging there. And her eyes, she was in shock. And she did die, it turns out, in a day. It must have been more. I never did find out what the final diagnoses were, but the shock was amazing. And then there were some people that we were able to take care of, and then the picture that was of me taking care of a captain, he had gone in 3 times. And I finally saw a picture of myself and this guy, and you could see his name tag. So I called him. He says, "Oh, I have a bone to pick with." I only saw it in January of 2002. He says, "A bone to pick with you." I said, what was that? Captain says, "You sent me to get checked out because you said your stethoscope was so bad and you couldn't tell if I had any ARDS, was adult respiratory distress." So I said, "You got to be checked out." So he said, "Well, I got there, they checked me out, I was fine, and I figured I'd hop another, ambulance back, and we got into an accident." I said, "Oh no, were you okay?" He says, "Yeah, but I just wanted to tell you that." I said, "Thank you very much." And it was the very day that he was going to become a lieutenant colonel. So he had gone up the ranks in security because he saw the planes hit in New York. He said, "We're next." He was a tracker of Department of Defense. So the secretary, they knew where he was at all times by GPS. But he was up at 9 o'clock. He got quickly dressed, and so he was going to the 11 to 7. And he said he saw the plane hit because he was in the parking lot. And it was he who told the Secretary of Defense it was a plane. And people did see the plane coming in right over the Arlington Cemetery and into the building, because there was all these theories that it was a bomb, it was, Well, when I went around the corner, I did not see a plane. It was disintegrated. It had blown up, basically. So there was this big crater, and I thought, what was that? They said it's 757. And I thought, well, how could it be, that's huge. I mean, really big. But they didn't let us go near it. We had to stay back and deal with the patients as they were coming out. Ambulances from all over, even as far as 40 miles away. They would be driving up and taking care of the patients. And one big truck came by, and that had men who were working with cement. So they had a saw, and they cut the Jersey barrier so that we could get the stretchers through, because we were handing over the patients over the Jersey barrier, which is about, 3 feet high. It was exciting and horrible at the same time. You felt so unable to help in a way, because most of them that came out, maybe they had a little smoke inhalation, maybe they didn't. But it was a day that was very difficult because the firefighters were there for a long time. We stayed until 7 p.m., but we could not go back into the building for anything, no food or whatever. So the Salvation Army brought white bread with Velveeta. I'll never forget it. And that's what our sandwiches were, about 1:30 in the afternoon, it seemed like. And then somebody commandeered an interstate bus so we'd have a bathroom. And then the civilians were allowed to go home. The other people slept under a tree. So, and as I said, one of my fellow nurses, the people that I worked with, she drove me home on her way home to South Arlington. It was a terrible day. And of course, we all knew that the next day was going to be as difficult. They kept looking for bodies, unfortunately, parts of bodies, and used some of the band members that had come up for, like they were not regular Army, they were just National Guard from Puerto Rico. And most of them had to be treated for the horror of having to look for bodies, or parts of bodies, which is even worse. And there was lots of water, surprisingly, on this plane fire. If you have a jet fuel burning, you need to have some sort of foam, and it took 3 days for them to get in touch with the folks in the airport because we were going 3 days into the burning building again. The Pentagon is 29 acres, so it was still burning on the top. So I don't understand. Anyway, so after that fire was out, now there was lots of water in the basement and in even the first floor. So those people were getting asthmatic attacks from work, from their workplace. So we could go to their workstation and say, this is unacceptable. We are going to make recommendations to management to move you to a parallel job elsewhere, outside of this water area. So we were able to do that. Again, that was, I think, a good accomplishment. So anyway, there was a lot of other problems because post-traumatic stress was very high. The psychiatrist realized that they could not see anybody that had a high security clearance and have them retain that clearance. So they decided they would tell us in primary care in the Pentagon, because Walter Reed was where the psychiatry department was. Anyway, so the psychiatrists had this bright idea that they would ask us in primary care in the Pentagon itself if we have anybody that we think has post-traumatic stress to send them to them, but don't document it on the chart. So I sent, it turns out, the most people to them. Because all you had to do was find out if anyone was sleeping okay, or if there were big problems with their interactions with other people, or whatever, if they're tied up tight as a drum. That was great because they got treatment, and they were told not to come back to us to tell us. The one guy that I really remember was that he said he called a meeting, and it was in Building 3. That was just being repopulated after the quadrant was fixed. He said, I had maybe 25 people come there. I went out for coffee for us. And when I came back, they were all dead. And he could not live with himself that he wasn't there with them, so that he could have also, either helped save them or died with them. I was the provider, as I was told that day, that sent the most people up for this very thing, for post-traumatic stress from 9/11, and he was probably the sickest guy that was treated there.
And where did you get your fighting spirit from?
Well, my father, poor thing, had 4 girls. I was born in Manhattan and raised in the Bronx and in the Mid-Hudson Valley, and he wanted to build buildings and go shooting and hunting and fix cars and all of that. And so I was the one that learned all of that. I built a bridge with him, and we wired houses, and I usually did the asbestos insulation work because I was small and I could fit into nooks and crannies, and I went under cars and we ground brakes, and I knew how to fix tires and tubes. That's probably telling too much, but anyway. I got a deer with his shotgun. And he said, "Oh, it's the gun." But then I learned music, and I worked from piano. I went to drums, and so I studied drums with Krupa Cole Studios in Manhattan, and then I had a band.
And what was a big song that you played?
Oh, I really remember Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White. That was sort of the trumpet player's favorite, so we played it a lot. But at the very end of our tour at this place, owned by a Polish guy, he has one daughter, and we played for her wedding, so we had to learn every polka known to man. But then I played in the pit at Fordham. I played with my husband. He was a sax player. And anyway, he had like a 16-piece band that was part of his grant and aid. It was marching down Fifth Avenue for Fordham. So anyway, we had the 2 kids, and one is a veterinarian and the other one is a drummer.